So, you want to hatch some chickens, incubate some eggs? Because that's what I'm about to do. I do it a couple of times a year. I prefer my hens to go broody, but here we are. It's too cold, and I would like to get some more hens for the next year because ours are getting older and they're not laying as much. So, let's get started. All right, let's incubate some eggs. I've got my Amazon incubator here. I've used this probably 3 or 4 times to incubate eggs from our own eggs and also to put chicks that needed to be taken away from mama in the incubator until they hatched. So I'm going to get this set up and then show you what I'm going to do. Now, if it's your first time ever incubating eggs, when you get an incubator, mine's a cheap one, so obviously it's not the best, but it does come with one of these tiny little temperature gauges. You might want to get a better one that's more accurate. I haven't had really any issues with this. I've still had a really successful hatch rate, but if you're concerned, I would definitely get a better one. You can get them on Amazon. This one also has an automatic turner, so then when you get to day 19, I believe, you have to take this out so the eggs aren't turning anymore, so that when they hatch, they're going to hatch directly onto this tray rather than in here. I have had our turkeys, I believe it was, that hatched early and I didn't realize, and I had to quickly get this out so their feet weren't getting caught when it spins around. Otherwise you've got a bit of a problem because it could potentially hurt their legs. Here. So I've got my eggs here. I'll show you them in a second. I've got them fully in the incubator. I do not do a hatch with water. I do what's called a dry hatch. I've done it every time and I've had really good success with it. Even with the turkey eggs we did last year, I did as a dry hatch, and all the ones that were fertile hatched. So you want to put your pointed ones towards the center. I'll show you that in a sec. I got these from a friend as well. These are not ours. I just wanted a little bit more diversity in our flock, and I don't really like the idea of constantly breeding our own birds with each other. I like to kind of mix it up. Plus, she's got some colors that I do not, so I wanted to mix it up a little bit. Some people will also say to put your incubator on for a little bit prior to putting your eggs in and let it warm up and everything. I didn't do that. We'll be fine. I've got all my eggs in there. Super pretty eggs. And if you wanted to do like just a regular hatch, like what it tells you to when you get your instructions, there's like a water bottle and a little dispenser. When I tried to do once with the regular, like putting the water in and adjusting the water and the humidity every day, it was such a headache. I found I could never get the humidity right. It was always shooting through the roof, and the temperature itself was also getting super, super high, and it was just stressing me out. So I just stick to the dry hatch. I feel like I have more success with that. It's easier. You don't have to worry about adjusting water. There's also this incubator came with, and it's to, I don't know, help adjust the humidity. I don't use this either. I just leave it. I should have put the styrofoam down before I put the eggs in, but whatever. I just did it. So it comes with this, and then it comes with a cover, which kind of just helps to keep the heat in. It is in our basement, so it's a little bit colder than the rest of the house, because this way the cats can't mess with it, the kids can't mess with it. It's not going to get accidentally unplugged, because that's something that does often happen. And it just, I feel safer having them down here as opposed to going upstairs and worrying about people messing with it. Anyway, so that'll stay on the cover. I think I kept that on the entire time until they were starting to hatch last time. I can't remember, but either way. So I'm gonna put the cover on and I'll show you. All right, so you can see it turning already as soon as you put the cover on. The brand is Trio Cottage, and it's, like I said, it's just a cheap one from Amazon. I actually wouldn't mind getting a nicer, fancier, and also bigger one at like the feed store or online, just because I feel like they're a little bit more reliable, but you can also incubate a lot more eggs. This one, if you have really big eggs, I mean, these seem to be regular size, so it's fine. But with turkey eggs, for instance, I can only incubate 6 because they're so much bigger than a chicken's egg. So there's that. And also, the other concern is the last time I did 6, I think 9 of them hatched, and it gets really, really crowded. So if they're all pipping and hatching at the same time, it's really overcrowded really quickly. It's not as bad if there's only a couple at a time. You can kind of take them out as you need to. Yeah, sorry. So if you wanted to take a couple out as they're, you know, dried off and stuff, the thing is you can't really open your incubator once a bird has pipped, because then you could get a shrink wrap chick and that would be terrible. So something I wanted to mention, obviously the temperature is going to continue to go up until it reaches the right temperature. It's American, so I'm in Canada. And it says in the book 74 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, obviously. We are Celsius, so it won't go up to that. I think it goes up to about 28, I want to say. It's typically what it hovers at, and that seems to be fine. That's the other thing you have to check constantly to make sure the temperature is where it's supposed to be. If not, you can adjust it. There's also this tiny little vent here, so if the humidity is too high, you can open it and close it. I've had times where it's fully open, times when it's fully closed. The styrofoam cover is supposed to help regulate the humidity as well. But I use it mostly just to keep things warm. The incubator's turned on, the temperature is still going up. It's up to 33 degrees Celsius, remember, now. The other thing I wanted to say is, so with this automatic turner, this automatic turner will turn your eggs every hour. If you don't have an automatic turner, because there are some really basic incubators that you can buy, you'd have to turn them yourself, which is kind of a pain. I think they say like 3 to 4 times a day they need to be turned, but this just makes it easier because you don't have to worry about allotting so much time every day. Make it easier. It's not that much more money, honestly, to get one that has the automatic turner in it, as opposed to just the tray. And I don't remember, I'll look and see on Amazon how much we paid for this. I want to say it was like $80. They do go on sale every so often. But like I said, the more money you spend, typically you can get better ones. The feed stores also have them for like around a couple $100s, and they're a bit more fancy. But you can also get the bigger feed store ones that are basically just like a cardboard, or sorry, a styrofoam box. And they're not super fancy either, but they're quite a bit more expensive. All right, so the lighting's just better here. Anyway, you get 2 booklets in the one that I have, which is the full guide, and then you have the quick guide to use as like a reference anytime. Now this is obviously going to tell you how to use it with like the water, how much water to put in, and where the humidity should be. The other thing too I found with this, probably because it's a cheaper incubator, that when I filled it with water, all of the water would go down into the bottom of the incubator. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to know when it's full and stop. Mine doesn't for whatever reason. So I ended up having, at the end, when you do have to add a little bit of moisture for their hatch, putting water just in the bottom. Some people recommend putting wet sponges in the bottom because you do need a little bit more moisture. The thing is too, once they start to hatch, they're going to end up releasing a lot of moisture, obviously, from their shells. And usually humidity shoots like right up. Mine was up to like 100% last time. So there's that as well. But like I said, so I did dry hatch. I did a bunch of information, or read a bunch of information online. Went on some chicken groups because I'm on Backyard Chickens, and some other local chicken groups that I have joined for information. Because if you're, I don't know, going into any sort of livestock ownership, I guess, you should try to do as much research as you can, because you can never be too prepared for what you're going to get into. So like I had said before, the reason we did the dry incubation is after I had done like a bunch of research. People seem to have pretty good success with it. We have as well. I don't think I've ever done a full regular hatch. I don't even think I did with my turkeys. I could be wrong about that, but At the end with my turkeys, I did add humidity because hatching turkeys and ducks is a little bit different than hatching chickens. So they did need a little bit more moisture, and it was such a pain to get the humidity correct. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I have a cheap incubator. Definitely look into getting a better one if you're really wanting to commit to it and not have to worry about being super particular with it. But we've had really good success with it. So the nice thing though with having an incubator is you can decide, you know, what breeds do I want to get? Do I want fancy breeds? Do I want regular breeds? Obviously, depending on where you live, I think in the States it's pretty common to have eggs shipped to you. I'm sure they do here as well, but I've never had eggs shipped to me. There's enough farmers where I live that there's always people selling specialty eggs, not specialty, but like special breeds, or just like a backyard mix. And eggs are not hard to get. So it's super fun to get different breeds, to experiment, to see like, you know, what kind of colors are your chickens gonna lay or how are they gonna come out. These eggs are from a friend of mine, so I have no idea what they're gonna look like. I've seen her flock obviously, but I don't know in terms of what's gonna come out of the eggs. So I'm really interested with that because they're totally different from the eggs that we've hatched from our own flock. And it just kind of lets you be a little more hands-on from the start to the finish of the whole process. I prefer to let my hens go broody, but I want more chickens. So now I'm incubating because I know my hens are not going to go broody again until the fall. They might surprise me. I doubt it. I've never had one go broody in the summer. As soon as the weather cools down, that's when they all decide to go broody, and it's usually like 3 of them at once. So I'm going to do this, and this way by like April, they'll be able to go outside, hopefully, if my math is right. They'll definitely be inside for the first probably 8 weeks because they need to be fully feathered before you can let them outside. We live in a colder climate here, so you can't really send them out prior to that unless you're going to put supplemental heat in your coop, which I do not do, and I will not do. We don't use any sort of heat lamps. We just use I have 2 brooder plates, which works great. We've had no issues with those, and so yeah, it lets you be a little more hands-on. But yeah, it's a fun little experiment. It's not hard. You just make sure you're checking the incubator every day, make sure it doesn't get unplugged, make sure nobody's messed with it, make sure the temperature is correct. If you are doing it the old-fashioned way, constantly checking your humidity, because ours comes with like a little bottle that is supposed to slowly drain into the incubator. It doesn't. It just pours the whole thing in. So when we do it, we have to pour stuff in the bottom and then just keep close on it. That's another reason why I don't like doing it that way. Mind you, I do want to get another incubator at some point because I'd love to do like ducks, and I don't know, we might do turkeys again, not anytime soon, but we'll see. But the feed store has like a fancier one that is obviously bigger. It can hold, I think, like 24 eggs. Ours can only hold 12. And the thing with ours is ours can only hold like 12 standard eggs. If you get really jumbo eggs, you're probably not going to have very much luck because it's not going to turn over properly with those huge eggs in there. The issue we had with turkeys is we got 6 eggs because I knew I likely wouldn't be able to fit 12. And even those 6 eggs, like it was tight in there because it's a very small, inexpensive incubator. Obviously, your hatch rate is just going to depend on a variety of things. It could be how fertile your eggs are. Now with our own flock, we have a few roosters and all of our eggs are always fertile. It's pretty rare at this point that we have an egg that isn't fertile. So we know going into it when we incubate our own eggs that it's likely that they're all going to be fertile. But that doesn't mean they're all going to hatch. Sometimes they, you know, don't make it past a week. Sometimes they don't make it past 2 weeks. We've had a couple that, I think it was the second time we incubated eggs, 4 that were fully developed, but just for whatever reason didn't make it out of the shell. I guess that's pretty common from other chicken owners that I've talked to. So it just depends. It sucks when you get really close to the end and then they don't make it because you're so excited, but also you just feel bad that they made it that far. I will say, when I was talking about looking at shells that are green versus looking at shells that are like pink, or a white egg would be super easy to see through, is if you're not going to get rid of them because you can't necessarily see the development, they might go bad and they might blow up, which is disgusting if it has never happened to you. It's super gross. We have had our hens go broody, always our olive eggers. Our production breeds don't ever go broody. And there's been times when they've sat on eggs that have gone bad, and you can tell by the smell when you pick the egg up, because even when my hens go broody, I still candle them to make sure they're viable. Otherwise, they might explode, and that's a huge mess, especially if it gets on the other eggs. It's going to potentially ruin them because it take the bloom off. But anyway, so the whole point of candling them is to see how far along they are, or to make sure that they're developing, because if they are not developing and it explodes in your incubator, it's going to be nasty. So I suggest making sure that you look up. It's every 7 days, so 7, 14, 21, and then, well, they hatch on 21, so I guess technically you wouldn't be checking 21. You check in 18, and that's when you go in your lockdown. So lockdown would be that you take the turner out that I showed you, and you just leave them. Now, they might hatch on day 19, and they might hatch on day 23. It just depends. I've had chicks that I thought, well, I had marked it when I put it in the incubator that they were supposed to hatch on a certain day, and then 3 days early I go downstairs, and like I said, that turner was in there and there was already one hatched, which doesn't typically happen, I don't think. I think I've had more around day 20, 21 is when mine seem to hatch. I know some people will say leave them for like 4 or 5 days past that 21. I've never had to do that. If they haven't hatched by day 22, 23, mine typically will not hatch. So just something to consider. When you decide to do them in an incubator, it's a little bit more reliable than a hen, because the problem with a hen is sometimes they're unreliable. They might get broody and then decide halfway through, I don't want to sit on them anymore, which is also another good reason to have an incubator. Some people just like to be able to incubate them inside, because then you obviously have all the control of the humidity and making sure that, you know, if you've got a hen that's kind of sporadic with how often she sits on them. I've had a hen once that I didn't notice at the time because it was the first time she had gone broody, that she kept getting off the eggs and the eggs would be cold, and that's when I realized they weren't developing, because hens are pretty smart that way. They can figure out pretty quickly when an egg is bad and they'll kind of push it out of the nest. But anyway, for an incubator, it's fun because then you can really experience the whole thing from, you know, the whole incubation period to hatching them and raising them. But I will say the first batch of chicks we got, not ones that we incubated, but first batch of chicks we got, we hand raised them, and they are our friendliest birds. So that's another thing to consider. When you do hand raise them, they do become a lot more friendly, a lot more docile. But there really isn't any skill involved in incubating eggs. It's pretty straightforward. You just put them in the incubator, check them day 7, day 14, day 18 when you go into lockdown, making sure the humidity is at the proper percentage and the temperature is at the proper temperature. Making sure, obviously, even though you're not going to be checking them every day in terms of viability, that you're still checking to make sure it didn't get unplugged, because that does happen, that they get unplugged, and if you left them too long, they can obviously not make it. Or if you have a power outage, thankfully we have a generator so we could hook them up that way. That's kind of the drawbacks of having an incubator, is that if you lost power for a while, or if somebody unplugged it, then obviously you're going to have issues there. Whereas if they're being raised by a hen, it's not such a big deal, because that's not going to happen. But I'm always interested to see what's going to come out of the eggs, what kind of breeds they're going to be. I am going to do a video on everything we've learned in the last few years having chickens, things that you need, things that you don't need, things that we weren't really prepared for. How much research did I do? Which I did a ton of research, because that's just the way I work. If I'm going to get into something like that, I want to have as much information as I possibly can. But there's a lot of hype around chickens, and like everything's scary now with chickens, right? With everything going on in the world, but they're actually really easy to care for, and they're really great to watch and interact with. And I mean, having your own eggs is awesome. This is, you know, we're going into the 3rd year of having chickens, and I love it. I love their personalities, and I just love being able to go outside and get eggs every day that are fresh. We've also done meat birds this last year, which we're going to do again in the spring. Yeah, chickens were our first step to everything else. We're getting pigs in the spring as well, and trying to just grow the homestead and try to get more and more animals and get deeper into, you know, gardening and caring for animals and all that stuff. And chickens are usually the first step for a lot of people. And everyone tells themselves, so I'm only going to get so many chickens. I said I was only going to get 6 chickens when we started this whole thing. And now we have 18. You can find much fancier incubators, whether it's on Amazon or if it's in your feed store or online, even like websites carry them, obviously. We just stuck with this because we weren't sure, one, are we going to stick to incubating chickens or any egg? Also, I didn't want to spend a bunch of money if it was something that wasn't gonna, you know, take off, I guess, like something that I wasn't gonna be good at or something that I wasn't gonna stick to. I didn't want to invest too much money. But like I said, I would get another one just because I feel like I've done it enough now that it would be nice at some point to be able to do more than 12. Or if we wanted to do ducks at some point, for instance, we wouldn't be able to do more than like 6. So there's that. I also want to be able to have new birds every spring so that they're constantly laying. The problem in the winter is that chickens, not always, but typically they'll slow down. The first year they don't. We had nobody slow down the first year. Everybody laid consistently, never had an issue. This year we were down to 1 egg from 12 or 13 hens. I can't remember how many hens we have it there. 12 or 13 hens when we were getting 1 egg. Now we're up to 4, I think maybe 5. There was one of my hens in the nesting box this morning that looked like she was trying to lay. So it's starting to ramp up now that the days are getting longer, but in the winter, we probably won't get any next year if we don't add more chickens to our flock. And that's just kind of part of it. Some people will add light to their coop, and we don't do that. We just let nature take its course and do what it needs to do, because obviously they need a break, and that's fine. Not the end of the world. You might be thinking too, it's the perfect time to start getting into owning chickens because eggs are getting expensive, things are kind of going crazy, and I think for most people, depending where you live, obviously if you live in the city or something, that's different, but most people are allotted so many birds. I don't think there's a restriction where we live with the amount of birds that you're allowed to have. I know there's places where they are restricted, like you can't have a rooster, for example. We have given some roosters away for free. Nobody really wants roosters, which is kind of the other hard thing to consider when you're incubating. If you have have plans for what you're going to do with your roosters, if you don't intend to keep them, think that through, because it is where we live anyway. It's really difficult to get rid of roosters. Even if you had like an Americana rooster and a beautiful rooster, it would be really difficult here. We've been able to get rid of a few of them, like give some away. I would never charge someone for a rooster, but yeah, nobody wants roosters, and a lot of people can't have roosters. So just consider that, I guess, when you're going into it. Yeah, if you're thinking that it's a great time to maybe put your feet in and see what it's like to own chickens, they're not hard to own. They're super easy to own. They're super friendly animals, providing that you're hands-on with them and that you're really involved. My kids are super involved with our chickens. Our chickens love our oldest especially. As soon as they see her, they all flock to her. They are such a fun animal to have. And aside from getting set up for having chickens, which is clearly the most expensive thing, and it's also the most time-consuming thing, it's really not that difficult. This is probably the most time-consuming thing, waiting the 21 days. Something else I wanted to say when I was reading this over, some people will tell you to clean and sanitize your eggs before you put them in an incubator. I've never done that. I've always had really clean eggs anyway, for my own chickens, and then these eggs that I got are obviously very clean, you can tell. So I've never had to like sanitize or clean them. I've heard mixed things about that. Some people say don't do that because then you take the bloom off, which can introduce infection into the chick, which could be obviously very dangerous. The eggs are laid with a special bloom to keep that egg safe. So there's never been a time when I've incubated that I've done that. Now, we did have an egg that exploded under a mama hen, and it was a mess. And then it got on the other eggs, and I was kind of scared because I was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, it's all over the other eggs. I can't leave it on there because they're also going to rot. And I ended up cleaning them up the best I could, but those chicks didn't hatch. So that's something to consider, that once you take the bloom off of that egg, it does kind of take that barrier away and that protection that that egg naturally has. So I don't clean mine. Even in the manual, like this incubator that I got came with a little scrub brush for the eggs to clean them. I don't do that. I just, as long as my eggs are clean, I pick the cleanest ones I can possibly find, put them in the incubator, and I've been fine. I feel like if you're going to sanitize them, then you're kind of getting into iffy ground that they may end up getting bacteria into the shell, and that's obviously not good. Same as when I was saying how if you have an egg that explodes in your incubator, which can happen, and it does happen, and it gets on the other eggs, that can be pretty risky as well. So just be careful of that. I mean, you kind of make up your own mind whether or not you want them clean. I don't really care. Like I said, all my eggs are always clean going into the incubator, so I'm not too concerned. Even my own eggs that I have in the fridge, I don't wash them unless they're really gross. In the summertime and spring, when they get really muddy feed and their butts get muddy sometimes from being out in the puddles, because my chickens love the water, they'll get mud and stuff all over their shells of their eggs, and then I'll wash them and put them in the fridge, but typically I don't have to. My nesting boxes are pretty clean. There shouldn't be any poop or anything anyway coming on that egg. Sometimes there is, sometimes chickens make a mess, but yeah, just something to consider, I guess. So I'll come back day 7 and I'm going to candle all of the eggs to see where they are developmentally, if there's some that just haven't taken off, or if there's some that developed and then stopped. Typically by day 3 or 4 you can start seeing a little heartbeat depending on the color of the egg. That kind of dictates how much you can see. And then I'll post it on here to show you guys just kind of what it should look like. I have a little tiny flashlight I use, but I'll show you. Anyway, yeah, and then you can kind of see step by step, and then I'll do it again at 14 days, and then again, like I said, at 18, and that's when you lock them down, you put them away, and then you just let things happen naturally and let them hatch when they're ready to hatch. So day 7, we should have a pretty good idea of how many eggs are fertile, how many eggs are not, and see where we go from there. Hopefully all 12 are, but then again, I don't know what I'm going to do with 12 birds. Obviously we have room, we have another coop that we're building, so it's not really a big deal if all 12 hatch, but I'm not really expecting 100% hatch rate. I've never personally had 100% hatch rate. The only time I had close to that was when there was one egg that didn't hatch because it had gone bad and wasn't even developed. But other than that, I've never had a complete 100% hatch rate. Even when you look at videos online, typically not every single egg hatches. Maybe in big production facilities, because they obviously are a lot more experienced and there's just a lot more involved in that, but personally no. And if I can get anything over like 7, 8, I'll be happy. But yeah, we'll see in another week.
Jesus.
It's a bird.
Jesus.
That means it's chicken lettuce, baby.
Oh my goodness! It's gonna hatch today.
It's a lot of work to break into the shell. There we go.